grating of the ego, which I mentioned some time back. So this was a process that continued to happen. Sometimes he would call me, he would say, so where did you study? I would say IIT. He would say, no, it ITI. So many of you might know that IIT and ITI are at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So IIT is like the premium engineering college. ITI is, they give you a vocational course. And Swami would insist time and again and say ITI, ITI, till that identity of me being an IITian had completely been reduced. On one such occasion, he had called some of us. He had called first one of my classmates, and he was telling him that the next day there was going to be performed a mass marriage. And then Swami was saying that, for this we need to measure the dimensions of Kulwant Hall to see like how many people can be seated. So he said, for that I need some engineers. And luckily, my classmate, he turned towards me and two others. We were the engineers in that group. And quickly we went up to Swami, and Swami told, I will give you tape, you all measure, this length from here to here and breadth from here to here. So we went, we measured, it was I think 56 by 60 feet, and we went up to Swami. And then Swami said, okay, so tell me the dimensions. So my classmate, he told Swami the dimensions. And then Swami said, we need to seat the couple together, and the ladies, they'll be wearing saris, so they need little extra space. So overall, we need like a 3 feet by 3 feet space for each couple and some distance. And Swami told the dimensions, and he said, okay, so now tell me how many people can be seated in the hall. And my friend, he tried doing the calculation in his mind, he could not. He turned to another of the classmates next to him, even he gave up. And then they turned to me, and when they turned to me, even Swami turned to me. And I used to pride myself that, I am very good at performing mental calculations. Thank you. That I can calculate this so quickly, and I did. I still remember, that engineer's approximation. Very quickly I calculated. The figure formed in my mind, 300. I was about to tell Swami, 300 people can be seated. At that moment, I do not know what happened. In my mind's eye, the 300 got removed and the number 400 got substituted there. And I told Swami, 400 people. Swami, immediately, his face changed. He said, you engineers are useless. Even the dhobi can do calculation faster than you all. And he said, how can 400 people sit? 300 people can sit over here. And I tell you the betrayal I felt at that moment. Like, because it was like, from my mind, that figure was stolen, the wrong figure replaced over there. And that feeling, so in so many little ways, he would take away, he would, chisel away at that ego that one has in so many different ways. We constitute our identities in so many different ways. When you look at a school principal, you know that is a school principal because that's how they will behave throughout their lives. When you see a policeman, you know whether they're in plain clothes or not, you can make out, yes, this is a policeman. We carry our identity everywhere with us. On our person, on our online profile in Facebook, everywhere our identity is present. And this is what Swami keeps on chipping away, because when you are in his presence, what is that ego you can carry? There is, how does this ego even dissolve? There are different ways in which Swami does it. Just excuse me. And I can only best describe it that he dissolves that ego in his very, very, very limitless love. There is no other way to describe it. That love, you just completely get dissolved in that. I recall this one very beautiful way in which he showed that he's always there, he's always taking care. This one time, this was the very hot summer of April 2001. Many of you, we think of Prasanthi Nilayam as the best place to come during most of the time when Swami is there, but definitely not in April and May. It is a very, very hot summer. Swami himself would go over to Brindavan or to Kodaikanal for the sake of devotees. That April, Swami delayed his departure to Brindavan. I remember the date, April 4th, 2001. A very, very hot day. It had crossed beyond 42 degrees. And Swami came out that day in that hot afternoon around 3:34. He came out and stood there, started speaking to Anil Kumar sir. They were speaking many things. Then all of a sudden Swami said, "Oh, today something happened." And then Anil Kumar sir said, "Swami, what?" And he said, our Chiranjeevi Rao, he had a sunstroke. And Swami looked at Anil Kumar sir. He asked, "Do you know what sunstroke is?" And Anil Kumar sir said, "Swami, yes, in the heat you get this." And Swami said, "What are the symptoms? What happens when you have a sunstroke?" And Anil Kumar sir, he said, "Swami, you get headache. There will be a lot of headache." Then Swami turned to me, he said, "Headache." I was seated there in the front. Then again, again he looked at Anil Kumar sir, he asked, "What else? What else?" And then he said, "Swami, you'll have high fever." So again Swami looked at me, he said, "High fever." Then again he looked at Anil Kumar sir, he said, "What else?" He said, "Swami, you'll shiver. With that cold, you'll shiver." And Swami looked at me, he said, "Shivering." I was wondering what is happening. And then Swami, he took one glance towards the lady's side. He looked at me, he said, "Where is your mother?" And then I turned that side, the place where she usually sits was missing. I put two and two together very quickly. I said, "Something is wrong." But Swami didn't say anything, smiled at me and walked away. And you can imagine my tension, the next half an hour bhajans, I don't know how I sat over there. Half my mind was here in Kulwant Hall, half my mind was at home. And as soon as Aarti got over, I ran all the way back home and kept knocking at the door. And the door wouldn't open. And my heart was cold with fear for what was happening. Kept knocking. And after some time, my mother opened the door and she looked very drained, very tired. And I asked her, "Mother, what happened to you?" She said, "This afternoon I went out, to buy some vegetables. And I came back home, when I sat, I had this headache. And then, I had this high fever. And I just lay down in the bed and I started shivering. And I could see there was this, in that summer, she had brought out the quilts, blankets and all. And she had covered. Then I said, "What happened after that?" She said, "I don't know. Suddenly, after some time, around 1 hour later, I felt as if this fever, it is suddenly leaving me." Like she could feel, her whole body recovering, that fever draining out of her body and coming out of her feet. That was the experience she had. And I cannot but conclude that, Swami knew exactly what was happening. And at that moment, when he described those symptoms, he was taking them away one by one till the fever itself had completely disappeared. Those words, he told my mother had such complete faith in Swami. She was like, my one guru, when it came to how you should approach Swami, how do you worship Swami? Because her faith was just unwavering. And I have seen, when this faith and Swami's love, when they come together, that's when those miracles take place. And when Swami said, I will take care of you, that Swami's word is like Vajra Sankalpa. Once it comes out, it has to happen. There is no obstacle that can come in its way. Not even distance. It doesn't need Swami to be physically present over there.